All right, ladies and gentlemen. About a week ago, the whole world celebrated the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who needs no introduction. Everybody knows that he was a civil rights activist, a preacher, a drum major for justice, and the iconic man that we all were taught about in school. However, only a week after we celebrated his life, his son, Dexter King, unfortunately died. And as his wife said, he died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 62 years old. Now, Dexter King, unfortunately, they said he succumbed to the disease of prostate cancer at the young age, once again, of 62. Dexter King was an author. He was also very active in continuing his father's dream, his father and his mother's dream of, civil rights activism and, keeping that dream alive that his father so eloquently voiced during his time on earth. And so, that is a very sad thing to happen at such a young age. And, only a week after the world is celebrating his father's life and his father's work. And that brings me to remember that there are a couple of more deaths that happened in the King's family that many people feel were suspicious. And if you don't know, in 1999, there was a commission that found that the government was complicit and had a hand in Dr. Martin Luther King's death. And even, as a young man, King and his father, Martin Luther King Sr., it is well documented that the FBI and the government had also had his family on their radar or on their watch list since the time even before his birth. And that's what makes these other two deaths somewhat, once again, questionable, if not suspicious. Now, many people don't know of Martin Luther King's brother. And his brother was named A.D. King, or Alfred Daniels King. Now, Alfred Daniels King was a little younger than Martin Luther King. I say he was about 2 years younger. And after Martin Luther King Jr.'s death on April 4th, 1968, A.D. King, his younger brother, was installed as the co-pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church. However, only 1 year later, 1 year and about 3 months later, on July 21st, 1969, Alfred Daniels King was found drowned in his swimming pool at the age of 38. Now, many people have spoken about his death and the suspicious nature of his death. One childhood friend stated that she was told at the time of his death that A.D. did not drown. He was actually killed and placed in that pool. And the reason many believe that assertion is because Alfred Daniels King was known to be an avid, an excellent swimmer. So tell me, how could someone be an excellent swimmer and drown in his own pool? So that is why a lot of people consider his death an assassination and not a drowning or not an accidental death. And considering once again that the government was complicit in his brother's death, we can't rule out their complicity as well, or their participation as well, in Alfred Daniels King's death. And only 5 years later, in 1974, Dr. King's mother, and once again, it's a incident that you very rarely hear of, but Dr. King's mother, Alberta Christine Williams King, was killed almost 5 years later on June 30th, 1974. She was shot and killed at the church that she was the choir director of. And that church was Ebenezer Baptist Church. Now, it was on this day that a 23-year-old black man, Marcus Wayne Chenault from Ohio, went to the church where, once again, service was going on. And as Alberta, Mrs. King, the senior Mrs. King, was sitting at the organ playing the Lord's Prayer, Chenault stood up and yelled, "You are serving a false god," and fired the gun. And it was then that the senior King, Mrs. King, was rushed to the hospital, and she died shortly thereafter of a gunshot to the right side of her head. Now, once again, it is well documented how the FBI has had this family on their radar. And because Mr. Chenault was this self-proclaimed Hebrew Israelite that claimed all Christians were his enemies and black ministers were a menace to the black people, he said that he had originally meant to shoot King Sr., but decided to shoot his wife because she was near him. So this act as well has been questioned by many people. And also, once again, it's not talked about in the history books and all of the things concerning the King family. But yet it is, once again, suspect because we all know about the government's use of Manchurian candidates. And those are people, many people suspect, what's that guy named? Harvey Lee Oswald of being one, as well as a few other people that have assassinated very prominent or famous people throughout the time in the U.S. History. So many people believe that even Chenault was one of those Manchurian candidates sent by the government to assassinate Mrs. King. Now, a lot of people know, of Martin Luther King III and Bernice King. A lot of those people, they're very active in the political sector. They're not as controversial as their father was, because as I noted in, my video on him, he was not liked by many at the time of his death, both black and white. So they seem to be more in line with the status quo. I think a lot of people were outraged when I think his son even met with Donald Trump. And so that should, kind of tell you on what type of time he may be on. But nevertheless, just in the case of Malcolm X and Malcolm X's grandson, many people don't know Malcolm X's grandson was following in his footsteps, and he was very radical, and he was coming up in the ranks, and connected with people out of the country, trying to once again follow in his grandfather's footsteps. Well, he was killed under suspicious circumstances in Mexico, some time back. And it is just a pattern, where, these activists and their family continuously suffer suspicious deaths, especially the ones who are following in the footsteps of, their ancestor or their forefather, and being, controversial or not lining up with the status quo. So I hope this death is not in that line in regards to the death of Dexter King. Once again, the condolences go out to the King family. But considering, the history of, people who have been fighting for justice and fighting in ways that upset the status quo, it's not impossible to believe that, maybe his death may not have been natural, but for all intents and purposes, this is just fresh, of course. So if it wasn't unnatural, you probably don't hear about those things until years later down the line. But once again, the condolences go to Martin Luther King and his family. But the fact that Alfred Daniels King and also Alberta Christine Williams King died, and a lot of people think that they died through assassination, that this death may have to be looked at as well. But that's just my opinion. Once again, my number is 919-587-7782. If you have any information that you think that I may have missed or you might want to add, feel free to contact me. But once again, y'all have a blessed night. This has been Taylor House Publishing. Peace and blessings.